Hey, did you ever wonder if anybody can just call themselves a reading specialist? Well, the answer is yes, and if you want to understand why, stay tuned. So, today I bring myself to make this video because I am constantly seeing on social media, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, almost everywhere on the internet that people are selling themselves as a reading specialist. And I want to answer the question of why I don't specifically call myself a reading specialist, but I want to back up. So I want you to understand that me as a tutor, anyone can be a tutor. Usually that you need is at least a GED or a high school diploma in the USA, but even some schools, you can be a high school student, and if you get straight A's or you can prove that you are a good student, you can be a tutor right now charging money. But essentially, I want you to understand that it is a very unregulated job profession. I used to be a personal trainer. That's a very unregulated job profession as well. If you go into social media, if you're a content creator, that's unregulated as well. All that means is there's not specific laws or licenses that you have to get. Now, there are going to be people that sell certifications and licenses that you can tack onto your resume to tell your customers, hey, you can trust me. Me personally, I work through a website that saw my credentials. I had to upload my diploma from high school, and I am very open and honest that I get my free training from Cox Campus, Reading Universe, Nessie Learning, Microsoft Learn, even Google Education certifications I take online. But I want you to understand that I won't ever be calling myself a specialist because of how unregulated this is. So first off, I want to move back a little bit. So a little bit of history. And this is something you can simply Google. You can fact check me as well. But if you want to know the history of where the term reading specialty or specialist come from, you're going to find it in the 1920s. So what happened in that time in America? So that's actually when we shifted away from an 8th grade education in all 50 states, and most 50 states adopted a K through 11 or K through 12 grading policy. And so this was a massive shift. They introduced standardized testing, it was becoming the norm, and it became the reality of much of what we see today. So I want you to understand that when you introduce standardized testing, you start to see learning gaps. So why did this not exist before then? Well, before then we had one-room school rooms. And so students would have a neighborhood schoolhouse and usually a neighborhood teacher, somebody they grew up with and they probably knew in the area, and they would walk to school and they were given certain lessons on orthography, phonology, which kind of encapsulated everything under the sun. They also learned about not just basic math, but math all the way up to what they might use if they graduated in 8th grade and they were going into a job immediately. And so they were very much a more accelerated school level. So a lot of people were grown up and we were told, hey, your grandparents only had an 8th grade education. And we assumed, oh, they must have been illiterate. They couldn't read. They must have only gotten what we got in 8th grade. And that's not true. They got an accelerated education to where they were, which is probably why they looked so tired all the time, but they were getting almost ready for, like, even if you graduate in 8th grade, you could go to college. So that's why you read a lot of books and they have like, oh, well, I started college at like 14, 15. It's because that was normal. It was kind of rare to start college at higher ages, which is kind of why you see in the UK, if they call college, which we consider high school, because the rest of the world kind of still kept that model, we didn't. So I want you to understand that this did change again because we started creating remedial reading rooms in the 1920s, and that's when opportunity knocks on the door, and we have Arthur Gates and William S. Gray who creates these diagnostic procedures for identifying when your child needs a reading specialist. So you might understand that William S. Gray also created the Dick and Jane books, which are based on whole language, which is the Look and Say model. So You want to connect these two in history. So reading specialists and whole language usually go hand in hand. That's why you will never see me identify as a reading specialist. So their job wasn't to teach orthography or phonology or structured literacy to everyone in the classroom, just like in the schoolhouse. It was a specialty, and it was only to these specific children that they were deemed to have severe difficulties. And so that's why I want you to understand that when it's hard to separate balanced literacy practices from debunked practices, it's because since the 1920, 30, and 40s, it's deeply rooted in debunked practices and debunked concepts. Because at that time, they thought dyslexia was literally people who couldn't read words. They thought it was word blindness, and that words and letters moved on the page and that they jumped all around, and that's not true. So, the red flag for 2026 parents is that the foundation of the idea of a reading specialist was built on these theories, and it did not focus on phonics. So there are names you want to know. If you hear a reading specialist or a tutor mention, "Oh, I love Mari Clay," or "I love Lucy Calkins," or "I love Ken Goodman," or "I love Gesu Pinnell and Fountas and Pinnell," red flags. So these people created curriculum and books and lessons and all these things around debunked whole language ideas. And they even sold these ideas to higher education. So there very well are teachers today that have a master's degree, a doctorate degree, or any fancy, very expensive degrees in debunked knowledge. And they're marketing themselves today as a reading specialist to you. So these aren't bad people. They are just operating in a system that was prioritized for meaning making over the neurobiological mechanic reality of the human brain. All right, so this brings me to, unfortunately, as a parent, we don't just have to worry about plain old literacy. You have to start teaching yourself about consumer literacy. So it really means that you can't rely on testimonials alone. You can't rely on reviews alone. You can't rely, the don't judge a book by its cover, kind of that thing. So when somebody says they have a reading specialist degree, you might want to understand that they might have spent six figures or $100,000 plus learning how to teach a student to guess at words on a page. So in my previous video, I've told you exactly how you might want to vet a tutor before you start paying them, but some simple questions you can ask, and even if your kid is in a public, private, or a micro school or homeschool setting, you want to ask, hey, do you know about structured literacy? Are you trained in structured literacy? Do you use research-based frameworks like Cox Campus, Reading Universe, UFLI, or UFly, or IMSE, and I would say the scary part today is you can't even just trust saying Orton Gillingham or Linda Moon Bell. You still have to vet these people. So if they haven't heard about any of these resources, that's a red flag. So I want you to understand that I'm not trying to scare you. I don't want to warn you about these things, but I want to invite you to go ahead and learn more about the history of the reading wars and certain things that have been going on in American education when it comes to literacy, because the history is that we have a broken foundation. And I'm going to make a video series out of this topic. So in the next video, we're going to go even more in depth. So if you want to like and subscribe and stay tuned, I will be posting more. But thank you so much for watching.